Hi, I'm Dr. Jim, a space scientist and a musician. Welcome to Space Quest, where we use stories and songs to learn about space with some special visitors from the future. It's always nice to see you both, Piper and Vista. Thank you for coming back from the future to visit me again.
You're very welcome, Dr. Jim.
We are always pleased to visit with you, Dr. Jim.
In this episode, we learn about how Tommy and Laura created the technology for a special new ship for the two of them to travel together through both space and time. This was something no one had ever done before, and it took new scientific principles to create the technologies that they needed. Once they got it working, they took their new space-time ship into the past to study the early history of space exploration. Do you think kids can go into space? Someday, there could be a girl named Laura and a boy named Tommy with their own spaceships and robot companions who come back from the future to learn how space exploration began. Here's a song about kids in space. Once we went into space to be part of a race so that people could walk on the moon. Many years have gone by, but again we will fly and return to the sky sometime soon. Can a girl fly through space to a planet? Could she pilot her spaceship and land it? Could she fly through the sky as the stars go by and bring home a space pomegranate? Many robots have flown to the greatest unknown and explored all the worlds of our sun. They have learned many things and gone through Saturn's rings, but there's so much that they haven't done. Can a boy fly through space in a rocket? Could he learn how to steer and to dock it? Could he fly through the sky as the stars go by and hold meteors in his pocket? You could learn to fly as the stars go by and reach for the endless sky. When the sun starts to sigh, many atoms will fly to be caught by the earth and remain. Glowing curtains of light will extend out of sight, painting colors that fall like the rain. Can the kids of the earth catch auroras? Could they have names like Tommy or Laura? Could they fly through the sky as the stars go by and hold northern lights in fedoras? You could learn to fly as the stars go by and reach for the endless sky. There's a world that's nearby with a red-colored sky and some others with ice all around. Some are big balls of gas where you'll never see grass since they don't really have any ground. Can the kids of the earth reach the heavens? Could they answer the biggest of questions? Could they fly through the sky as the stars go by and reach for new worlds as they beckon? Could they fly through the sky as the stars go by and reach for new worlds as they beckon? Let's see if we can learn anything more with our time-traveling friends from the future. We've heard before about how Tommy and Laura visited all of the planets in our solar system to test out all of the new technologies they invented for their spaceships. But how did they invent all these new things? Where did all of their new ideas come from?
Incoming time text from Tommy. Greetings, Dr. Jim. Laura and I were discovered by Dr. Hans von Bodenheimer, director of the Mars Museum, when we were both quite young. He wanted to see if we could discover new scientific principles to build a ship to travel through space and time. Tommy, over.
Incoming time text from Laura. Dr. von Bodenheimer thought it would be best to start the search for new scientific breakthroughs with talented youngsters who could develop their own fresh ideas from the beginning of their educations. Laura, over.
I think I see why he would want to start over with new young minds. Everything that we believe about science today would make it very unlikely that we could ever build a ship to go faster than light or backward in time.
But that is exactly what people needed to do to meet the aliens that sent out a signal from so long ago and far away.
That is exactly right, Piper. It would take so much time for a radio signal to reach the Earth from a distant star that any alien civilization could be long gone by the time the people of Earth would ever receive it.
Of course, Vista, the only way to meet the aliens would be to travel back in time to find them just as they were sending out the signal. Now that we understand what needed to be done, how did Tommy and Laura think of everything they would need to build a space-time ship?
Is the space-time ship the same thing as the rolling rocket?
Yes, Conductor Arthur, it's the very same ship. It's a special ship that Tommy and Laura built so that the two of them, along with Piper and Vista, could visit the alien star system back in time. But how? As far as we know, time travel should be impossible.
And yet, here we are, visiting you from the future, Dr. Jim. So it must be possible after all, at least in our future. The key, of course, is antimatter.
That's right. The space-time ship can be changed into antimatter whenever you need to travel backward through time. However, this sounds like a very tricky thing to do, and I imagine it must take a lot of power to make it work.
Laura invented a way to provide enormous power for the space-time ship with a fusion generator. To make the fusion possible, she had to use antimatter for time travel for that as well.
I don't understand. What does time travel have to do with a fusion generator? Doesn't it just take hydrogen and fuse it to make helium?
The problem has always been how to contain the reaction. Laura took her inspiration from the stars, and Tommy helped her to construct the working model of the fusion generator.
The stars create fusion because of their immense gravity. So how did that inspire Laura? Anything small enough for the space-time ship couldn't possibly be big enough to produce the gravity of a star.
That is true, Dr. Jim. However, Laura reasoned that if the force of gravity could be accelerated in time, it could be made much stronger and thus more effective within the fusion generator. The time-traveling properties of antimatter could be used for this purpose.
That's really interesting. Maybe Mr. Fusion is possible after all. You're saying that antimatter could be used to increase the force of gravity in the fusion generator, which would help to turn the hydrogen into helium. That's brilliant.
Yes, but it must be done very carefully, or else there could be a huge explosion. All of the properties and forces had to be balanced exactly, and it took both Tommy and Laura working together to build the fusion generator.
And that's how the rolling rocket was able to go back to the future.
Well, that's certainly how it sounds, Conductor Arthur. There must be more to this story, however. It's one thing to create a large power source like a fusion generator, but how was it used to turn the space-time ship into antimatter so that it could travel through time?
When Tommy and Laura were trying to think of new ways to look at basic principles of science, they assumed that all matter exists in structured patterns that could be changed. If these patterns could be reset, it might be possible to change matter to antimatter and back.
What sort of patterns do you mean? Are you talking about the building blocks of matter at the subatomic level?
Yes, exactly. It turns out that all of the particles and antiparticles are made of the same building blocks that fit together like a chain. In this case, the links in the chain can be flipped in sequence, just like a row of standing dominoes.
Piper is correct, but the dominoes must be standing up together in the right arrangement before they can be flipped one way or the other. It takes an enormous amount of power to create the field that makes the dominoes all stand up the same way at the same time.
I see. The power from the fusion generator is used to force the particles to line up like dominoes. Then one can just start a chain reaction one way or the other to switch between matter and antimatter instantaneously. That's amazing.
Speaking of massive gravity, do you know why the black hole swallowed both space and time?
No, Piper. Why did the black hole swallow both space and time?
Because it was hungry enough to come back for seconds. Ha 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 ha.
That does not compute, Piper.
Another fine example of Piper's humor programming.
Before Tommy and Laura could go back in time to study early space exploration, they had to create the new space-time ship. To do this, they had to study math and science, develop their own new ideas, and learn how to fly. Here's a song about how they did all of that.
Tommy took a look around at the sky and at the ground. He began to think about what he could see. Clouds float up, but rain falls down. Diamonds form beneath the ground. Many things exist because of gravity. Tommy's rocket was a blast. Laura's ship was very fast. And together they could go so very far. They combined all that they knew, and they built a ship for two. And someday they might just reach another star. There is science everywhere, on the land and in the air. Tommy learned to see the patterns big and small. He designed fast planes and cars, but he looked up at the stars. He built rockets to explore and see them all. Tommy's rocket was a blast. Laura's ship was very fast, and together they could go so very far. They combined all that they knew, and they built a ship for two. And someday they might just reach another star. Laura loved to watch planes fly as they streaked across the sky. She began to learn to take off and be free. She flew gliders, then fast jets, and took people and their pets to the edge of space to float in zero-G. Tommy's rocket was a blast. Laura's ship was very fast, and together they could go so very far. They combined all that they knew, and they built a ship for two. And someday they might just reach another star. Who can say what they'll learn today to help them on their way? Laura learned to fly in space. It became her favorite place. Tommy left the earth behind to go explore. There was so much they could see in the realm of mystery. Many moons and planets led them to much more. Tommy's rocket was a blast. Laura's ship was very fast, and together they could go so very far. They combined all that they knew, and they built a ship for two. And someday they might just reach another star. And someday they might just reach another star.
And that's how Tommy and Laura became space explorers and built their new space-time ship for two. We learned before about how they visited all of the planets to test out their new engines and sensors. However, time travel is a very different thing. So how did they test out that part?
Dr. von Bodenheimer gave Tommy and Laura an assignment to go back in time to observe the early space launches. This was the first test of their new ability to travel through time.
Of course, that explains how they were able to study the history of space by recording images of the first space flights. I imagine they got to see everything from the first orbit by Yuri Gagarin through the Apollo moon landings.
That must have been one giant leap for Tommy and Laura.
It certainly was, Conductor Arthur. Tommy and Laura were the first to travel back in time and return safely to their own future. They had to be very careful not to interfere with history in order to preserve their probability streams so that nothing would change for them.
Yes, I remember you saying that their own future is just one of many different possibilities. When they went back in time, did Tommy and Laura see Neil Armstrong recover his Gemini capsule that was spinning out of control before he later went to the moon with Apollo?
Tommy and Laura were able to record that incident as well as many others. They were especially interested to follow the mission of Apollo 8, which was the first time that humans orbited the moon and looked at the far side. Later, they watched Apollo 11 land on the moon.
That was quite a daring mission to the moon in 1968, since it was the first time NASA sent astronauts into space using the full-size Saturn V rocket. It was a great success, and it paved the way for more Apollo missions in 1969, the year that Armstrong and Aldrin landed on the surface of the moon.
The Saturn V was very successful because the designers made sure the rocket engines could run safely. A rocket engine is basically a controlled explosion, so they must be handled very carefully.
It truly is a matter of rocket science, Dr. Jim.
Yes, it is, Conductor Arthur. I'd like to know more about how Tommy and Laura actually used their new space-time ship to travel to see the famous moments in history. Wouldn't they need to take the motions of the planets and the stars into account?
That is a very logical conclusion, Dr. Jim. Laura is a navigation specialist, and she had to calculate the positions of the Sun and the Earth in our Milky Way galaxy at each of the times they wanted to visit. These were very complicated calculations, but I was programmed to help with astronomy and navigation.
As we travel through time with Tommy and Laura, I always use my radar sensors to avoid any collisions with untracked objects in space.
But how can you be helping them with navigation and safety if you're both here with me now? Aren't they traveling to the alien star in the future?
That is the beauty of time travel, Dr. Jim. After we are done visiting with you, we can go back to the future at the exact moment we left Tommy and Laura. From their point of view, it is as if we had never left at all.
How fascinating. Time travel really makes you think. Let's hear a song that tells the story of how Tommy and Laura went into the past to study early space exploration. The year 1961 was when Yuri Gagarin became the first person to orbit the Earth. After that, there were many more accomplishments in space as people prepared to visit the moon. Yuri Gagarin was the first to orbit Earth. Then Alan Shepard rose into the blue. Mercury capsules flew with people like John Glenn, and Gemini taught them how to rendezvous. People around the world were racing for the moon, but NASA led the way in '69. After Armstrong and Aldrin were the first to land, Apollo came in peace for all mankind. Going to see the past, they built a ship to fly through time, looking for things to get on camera, moments that will shine. Doing it for the Mars Museum took them all around. When they got back, they brought the pictures of the things they found. If their ship got near the show, they could be a UFO. Tommy and Laura had to stay far enough away not to be seen by the early astronauts, or else their space-time ship could be mistaken for an unidentified flying object. Laura saved all the images of ships and crews that she and Tommy gathered from the past, bringing them back to Mars for people there to see the history of space from first to last. After the Mars Museum had an open house, the history display was well received, sharing the truth of how it all began in space by showing the good work that the kids achieved. Going to see the past, they built a ship to fly through time, looking for things to get on camera, moments that will shine. Doing it for the Mars Museum took them all around. When they got back, they brought the pictures of the things they found. The trip to the past was a success for Tommy and Laura. Because of their work, the Mars Museum gained many valuable recordings of the history of early space exploration.
All four of us returned safely to Mars, and Dr. von Bodenheimer was quite pleased. The Early Space History Gallery is one of the most popular exhibits at the Mars Museum.
It took a great deal of careful attention to detail to make the mission a success. All of the new technologies were needed to make the trip back in time, and everyone played a part.
What a great story, and a wonderful example of teamwork in action. It's amazing what people and robots can do when they work together and appreciate each other's abilities.
It's a beautiful day in the galactic neighborhood.
We've been talking about how Tommy and Laura developed all the new science and technology they would need to build their new space-time ship to find the origin of the alien radio signal.
Incoming time text from Tommy. It was a lifelong project for us to build the space-time ship, and we didn't know at first whether it would work. Now, we are nearing the end of our journey to the alien star system. Tommy, over.
Incoming time text from Laura. Everything is working well so far on our journey. With help from Piper and Vista, we have been able to navigate through both space and time, gradually closing in on the exact direction of the aliens' radio signal. Laura, over.
Thank you again, Piper and Vista, for helping us to communicate with Tommy and Laura in the future through time texting. It's exciting to think that they are getting near the end of their journey. Thank you again, Conductor Arthur, for joining us as we follow their adventures in space. Tommy and Laura had to develop new science and technology ideas to build the new space-time ship. They also had to learn to fly and navigate through space and time to see the early history of spaceflight, which was the first test of the space-time ship. Finally, they made it back to the Mars Museum in the future to deliver all of their recordings for people to see. I'd like to thank my friends Piper and Vista and Conductor Arthur very much for joining me today on Space Quest. And you too. Remember, keep your eye on the sky and keep thinking for yourself.
Bye-bye.